Hello, 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 good morning. You are in for a treat in the next hour. My name is Jallicia. I'm an assistant professor. Thanks for reminding me to introduce myself to the world. In Black Studies and American Studies at Amherst College, and thrilled to be here. So first off, a few of us were just talking about how wonderful it was. Dr. Dorothy Roberts, not sure where you are in the room, but just being able to share space and wisdom with Dr. Dorothy and opening that is a great segue into our next discussion about particularly the part about anti-Black pathologies and how those unfold in policy, medicine, and healthcare, and the critical significance of birth workers in not only countering that, but in absolutely activated and enabling livable Black futures, as Dr. Stacey McCormick discussed yesterday, what that means. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the community-based practice of reproductive justice future in real time in our present. We're also going to talk more about the political and significance of Black birth workers in building reproductive justice futures. Along the last few months, we've been talking about and thinking through the role of doulas, full spectrum, postpartum, abortion, and also questions around postpartum care. And we've also linked this with our discussions around Black women's wisdom, ancestral spirit and knowledge, and how that allows us to shape and enact reproductive justice futures. And so the hopes for this panel is for you to really engage the wonderful, vibrant, generative work happening locally and regionally in practice, for you to see the central significance from birth workers in our RJ futures, hearing from them themselves, and for us to have an opportunity to really figure out how we can continue to activate our respective networks, knowledge and positions, and institutional locations to really build on this important mobilizing that's happening in our present. So big up to all of you. So we're going to start it off a little bit different. We are going to begin popcorn style. Boom, boom, boom. And we're going to have our esteemed guests talk a little bit about how do you come to this work in the practice of reproductive justice futurism? How do you enter it, and what does the practice of reproductive justice futurism look like for you in your respective position? And I'll just start off on my nearest left. And then
Oh, wait, I'm the nearest.
my bad, not the nearest left, maybe the other left.
That would be Nashira.
Oh, the mic. I really thought I was going to go at the very end.
I'm just, going with the flow.
Thanks. I'm really tickled to be here. Super just like the last 2 days, it felt like a salve that I just really needed on my spirit. So just thank you all for what you bring to the room. So I'm Nashira Baril. I use the she, her pronouns. I am the daughter and great-granddaughter of midwives. As I know for now, on my French-Canadian side, but I'm sure also on my African-American side. I come to maternal health work beginning in the early 2000s in the City Health Department in Boston on a federally funded, believe it or not, project explicitly to address racism in maternal health. And my early work was really informed by the teachings of Dr. Kamara Jones and really understanding, structural racism on multiple levels. And what I realize now is that while it was very focused on racism and Black maternal health, what was lacking for me in those foundational years at the health department was a deep, explicit focus on reproductive justice as it was birthed and as we know it. And so what happened was I was, I paraded around the city in my early professional career providing, slides and data about how dangerous it is to be Black and living in these neighborhoods of Boston, and these were more likely to have bad outcomes across all measures. And after I worked there for 12 years, and I got really burnt out with this focus on Black death and the ways that we talked about that, and then I felt somewhat hamstrung to figure out actually liberatory strategies and practices for addressing that from inside the health department. So I left the health department and about 10 years ago began working to open a community birth center in Boston. And I can talk more about that, but I think what was really important was orienting myself to reproductive justice as a framework and a practice. And I think healing myself and my practice from being really centered on trauma and Black death, and really focused on liberation and love and what's possible.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Sessions. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Jallicia, Loretta. I love that you use salve. I feel like this warm broth that I have entered. I don't want to ever exit. My work is full spectrum doula. I'm also an herbalist, yoga instructor, Reiki practitioner, meditation teacher. So I approach this work from a wellness perspective as a healer. Right now, I am working on a study at Emory, which is looking at PTSD in Black pregnant women, and I am delivering interventions with the hope that we will be able to take the results and be able to nationalize those results. Hopefully, whatever intervention is better will be applied to every first trimester visit. So my approach really is coming from a love place as well. I love that you said that or ended with that. How can we take ancestral practices and bring them into healing? Plants, working with the plants is a big piece of my work. Postpartum, also prenatally. I focus on the nervous system a lot, looking at stress, how we can minimize stress, preconception as well, so fertility. And what else do I want to say? I think that's all I want to say. Really happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Axis. I use they, them pronouns. I live here in Western Massachusetts and I work as a full spectrum doula. I came to that work through a midwifery track initially. I thought I was going to be a midwife, a home birth midwife, and I went to school in California, and at the time, more than 10 years ago, there were some unsavory laws for both midwives and birthing people. And I really wanted to work outside of the system and not with the system, or, be incarcerated because of the work that I was doing. And so I decided to take the track of becoming a doula and being able to work with people centering their bodies and their choices. And over the years, I have done postpartum doula work as well as abortion doula work. And I've also done a bunch of training for healthcare providers for providing care across the gender spectrum, which is another form of reproductive justice that is really important to me. And I think that something I'm coming to now, as I've provided care for many people, is also remembering to care for myself as a doula and care provider.
Hi everyone, my name is Norris. I use they and she pronouns. I currently serve as the Massachusetts State Director at Reproductive Equity Now, but I came to this work after visiting ACT UP New York and sitting in on a community meeting that they had and feeling like I had my mind just exploded. At that time I had learned so much about all the ways that HIV was still impacting our communities in such disproportionate ways. And when I got back home from that visit, I immediately was like, I have to get involved in this work. And so my public health work first started with family health, doing public health advocacy work, mainly around ending the HIV epidemic. I later kind of supported a friend as her water broke in those first early moments of labor and felt something snap in my brain, and I caught the birth bug. And so I trained to be a doula soon after that, and started to kind of try to figure out where the network was of birth work in my community. And that's when I, in the early days, came across a neighborhood birth center. And so I reached out to Nashira and to Jesse, who's the program manager at the time. I was like, are y'all looking for an intern? Because I'll work for free. And so I came on that summer for an internship, and it was a really transformative piece to my journey, a really transformative time for me. It really changed the way I think that I approached this work. It was the first time where I had been able to engage in the visioning process of what could be, and kind of using that as the base of where we do this work from. And so I, from that experience, learned that I hope to become a midwife in the future as well. So I like to say that I'm a current advocate, doing all of this policy work with Reproductive Equity Now and other organizations, but future midwife. I'm also a birth doula and NBC's forever intern. So.
Good morning. My name is Amber. I am excited, nervous, honored to be here this morning. I currently serve as a research analyst for the Afiya Center through the ACLS Leading Edge Society Fellowship. And then I'm talking about how I came to the work. Okay. I come to this work from a very varied background that includes dance, Africana studies, community counseling, HIV prevention, and now reproductive justice. And so currently my work focuses on centering, bringing all this interdisciplinary background that I have and centering Africana studies in how we approach care and programming in RJ and in wellness in general. So when I think about what I would like to see in terms of reproductive justice futurism, I'm really interested in what I like to call lessons from Sankofa. So what we can glean from ancient and ancestral wisdom, and how we can infuse that into our practices and our programming, and then how that will help us to achieve reproductive freedom.
Wonderful.
Jallicia, I think you should answer the questions.
Oh, that was cute. We'll continue on to the make sure I leave enough time for all of you. But yeah. So moving it on, we would love to. I think you were starting it off right.
Yeah.
Right. If you were to talk about your that, I don't know if you. But we'll pass the mic on to. So I have basically each individual questions for tailored to each person, and then we'll pass the mic on to Dr. Amber, who's going to provide a bit more of a presentation discussion. That was the word. Oh, it's the other way. So individual questions first.
I think Amber's
going first.
Okay, Amber goes first.
Cool. Can I send that back from you? Okay, so this morning, I'll say, as you can see from our varied backgrounds, when I first found out this was the panel I was on, the Nene Leaks in me said, now how did I get in there? And I got a little anxious, not having a background directly related to birth work, just, the work I've done with our birth workers at the Afiya Center. I got a little anxious thinking about what it was that I could offer. And as I meditated, I had to remind myself to bring my work, bring that varied background, just like I do every day, to this panel as well. And so yesterday there was a question posed about how we take our individual spiritual practices and how we can make those actionable for the purpose of movement. And I do believe that there's information within Africana studies and ancient and ancestral wisdom that helps to explain that. So my goal this morning is to kind of introduce or remind or expand upon for some concepts within Africana studies that I've observed in the work that I've done with my colleagues at the Afiya Center, as well as in meeting Nashira and Nicole ahead of time, some things that I've heard them share about in their work too. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into it, and I got a timer so I can make sure I don't take up too much space here. And there are about 5 concepts that I want to kind of focus on. The first is an ideology introduced by Malodoma Some in the Healing Wisdom of Africa. And what he says is that spirit is technology. So what that means is just how we use our phones, we use our computers, and all of these things to access information, to access it rapidly, to connect with others, to access resource. You can do that by seeking out spirit as well. You, through your personal relationship, can obtain information from spirit. Through discernment, you can connect and discern kindred spirits, right? So you can connect with others and in that way obtain resource. And so what Malodoma Soulmate does is he critiques Western society, saying that there's too much emphasis on using, depending, or leaning into technology as we know it. And that he believes healing can come about some of these issues we have in terms of race and other social constructs and isms can be healed if we are intentional about incorporating spirit in whatever way that looks like for you into your daily practices and into our collective practices. So in real life, what that looks like is when we showed up to this event, I had no idea what Dr. Crystal Fleming was going to talk about yesterday. I didn't know that she was going to be referencing Malodoma Some and his wife.
Spirit.
But I knew they were going to be scholars that I would reference in my talk. I didn't know that Dr. Sydney was going to pose the question that she posed about how you make these things tangible. But I knew that's somewhat what I was going to focus on. That is what it looks like. That type of alignment is what it looks like for spirit to be at work in the background, because some people in this planning were seeking answers from the invisible or from spirit about how we should go about and what we should offer as we spoke. The second concept has to do with how we seek knowledge, or the type of knowledge that we seek. And so moving from axiology to cosmology. In your centric view, they tend to philosophically prioritize axiology. So, like, questions of research and questions of practice then focus on valuation, ethics, and aesthetics. So then we kind of filter things through these ideas of who's better, who's superior, who has what worth, who's worth more, who's desirable, who's right, what's right. So then white becomes superior to black. Pro-life is right, abortion is wrong. We can use eugenic ART practices to reduce the population of differently able bodies because we don't find that desirable, and so on and so on. Versus if you shift the type of knowledge you seek, the type of questions you're asking, to a cosmological perspective. In ancient African and indigenous societies, this was the priority, so that questions instead centered the order of the universe around us and our role in it, and then how we connect to it. And so if I begin to interrogate questions, I approach my work from that perspective. I start to filter things through the lens of who am I? What am I supposed to be bringing? When I get into the room with Liv, who is Liv? What does Liv bring? And then how can what I bring, what I do, complement and elevate what Liv does, and vice versa. And by doing that, we create a harmony and a balance that works for all of us, right? Because also within a cosmological belief, it's not a question of valuation. We believe that everything, everyone has divinity inherently. So we're not questioning what it is, how much it is. We have it just because we're born with it. And so also that includes that everything has spirit in it, or a piece of spirit, so to speak. And we call that consciousness. So plants have consciousness. Animals have consciousness too. Humans are not better than animals, are better than plants, right? There's an equity in each. which is why then we can believe that in order to achieve reproductive freedom, we need reproductive rights, but we equally need environmental rights, economic rights, civil rights, etc., etc. And we're looking to see how we can elevate and connect with the spirit in each thing and each person. And so in terms of real life, if we start to conceptualize our questions through that cosmological lens, then instead of thinking about who deserves care and at what level, we start looking at things like, how can I provide care for each individual that fuels their existence? Again, because we already know they're divine. It's not a question of whether they need care. What is the care that they need to fulfill their role? That's going to also give the community and the universe what it needs. So that moves us to dismantle these systems of hierarchy and white supremacy, and instead adopt systems that reinforce, divinity and promote equity. The third concept is community and village, which we kind of already know about because we're all in this room at this convening today. And it goes back to this concept of the cosmology, understanding the divinity in each other, and how that maintains universal balance. It also goes back to embracing the diversity of gifts among individuals, and believing that with that divinity, everybody comes bringing a gift. So in Healing of Wisdom, Maladoma Somé also states that everyone is born with a purpose, and knowing that purpose ensures an integrated lifestyle. Dr. Daniel Black says that gifts are summoned by the community to meet the needs of the community. So going back to the earlier statement of spirit being technology, when we say gifts are summoned by the community, it means that when we pray, when we manifest the things that we're asking for, believing that we need in this world, those things then come through the people who are in the room with us, which is why we can have varied experiences on this panel. We have lawyers in this room, we have professors in this room, we have providers in this room, we have students in this room, and all of these gifts together come to help us move forward. This also looks like, in a real-time example for me, one of the projects I've worked on at the Afiya Center is developing a doula training curriculum that emphasizes RJ framework and is intentional about thinking about what birthing practices look like for individuals living with HIV, because they're often left out of the conversation. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have a birthwork background, or as I like to say, I don't know nothing about birthing no babies. So I was able to bring to it, right, my abilities of research, my abilities of curriculum creation, but it was the knowledge and the gifts of the birth workers that helped to give the content. And when we delivered the training, that helped to make the training make sense. If it had just been my view of the curriculum, the phenomenology and the life experience and the ancestral wisdom that participants got, they would not have received. And time is getting short, so I'm going to move on to the next one. But what I will say about that is that also reinforces the concept of Ubuntu, which most of us have probably heard of, and that's the concept that I am because we are. And so our relationships are bi-directional and reciprocal. The fourth concept is storytelling, which we've talked a lot about, so we already know the value. But I did want to just point out how there is ancestral wisdom in that practice. And the first is through the tradition of Nomo, which is the generative and regenerative power of the spoken word. So that concept comes from the Dogon people of Mali. But Nomo refers to the ability to transfer energy to give life through your words and through your oral vibration. So we say things all the time like, you have the power of life and death in your tongue. That's what we're talking about when we talk about Nomo. And so in real life, that looks like how after Plenary 3 yesterday, everybody's mind was blown, right? But there was a fire kind of lit inside of us to start thinking about, wheels started turning. And wheels are turning as we're sitting here about how we're going to take everything that we've learned throughout this time and put it into practice. Because there's a transference of energy that's happening as well as a transference of knowledge. This also looks like in the Livable Black Futures project that Dr. Stacy spoke on yesterday. We engaged women living with HIV in storytelling circles. Many of the women, when they came in day one, they were timid, they were shy about opening up their stories because they had already been silenced, their stories had been dismissed, all these things by providers, even friends and family. By the time they leave in week 6, they're telling their stories boldly, they're living out loud, and they're telling their stories for advocacy because they learn the power of their words. And they also report that they feel healed through that experience. And so that power of NOMO shifts the energy that they have had in being disenfranchised to being empowered. And I think I'm coming on the last one. I have about 1 minute. The last concept is dimensionality, which is one of the 7 senses developed by Karyamu Welsh-Asante in her Umfundalai method, which is actually meant for teaching dance. But I feel like life itself is a dance, so I'm going to transfer it over here. And dimensionality refers to the spiritual quality which honors and acknowledges the role of spirit in processes of creation and recreation. So this looks like when doula and midwives working with individuals and family that they care for, the ways that they are intentional about how they incorporate those individual spiritual practices into their birth plan. And then where we could probably use work is how we get birth centers, hospitals, and care teams to honor then that care that's been created and also incorporating that spiritual process for that intentionality. This also looks like when we start out our convening by calling in our ancestors through altars because we're inviting them in the space from the beginning through the end. So I have about 4 seconds. I'm going to cut there so that there's time for my panel.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Amber. We will pass our first question to Liv. How do you navigate resource sharing in an increasing in the era of increasing surveillance, and how do we confront the ways new technologies expand the surveillance and criminalization of pregnancy?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. Thank you. So I think this is something that I'm starting to think about a lot more with my work with reproductive equity now. I'm about 2 months on the job, but we are actively involved in coalition and advocacy related to data privacy. And so I think that one thing that I have found really important has been to understand what and how tech is being used to do surveillance. Before I started this position, I actually didn't know much about this topic. But I would love to see, like, just a show of hands in the room, how many people are aware of the sale of location data? Oh, a good number. A good number. Okay. And so I think one of the bills, to give you an example, that we're looking at is around digital privacy, is that we're in coalition currently with the ACLU and several other organizations advocating for a bill called the Location Shield Act. And in this bill, essentially, it would eliminate the sale of location data because we have recognized that there is the issue that is surrounding location sale data is that it's being used to weaponize. It's being weaponized against people to criminalize, their identities, their healthcare choices, and things of that nature. And this is not a hypothetical question or a hypothetical idea. It's something that is happening actively now. The Heritage Foundation has shown they can track migrants who are coming across the southern border and showing where they land in the United States with heat maps. Other organizations have shown that they can use heat maps of location data to demonstrate who is visiting Planned Parenthood clinics and when. And there have been instances where groups of bad actors have used location data to target individuals. There was a Catholic priest, I believe, who was targeted by a local group, where he was outed and then fired from his position because they were able to show that he was visiting gay bars. And so this is a very real issue that's impacting a lot of people. It's something that impacts all of us. Our cell phones, my cell phone's on my body right now. Knows exactly where I am. Surveillance is, oh, hello? I think this one needs a charge. Hello? All right, we're back. And so to answer your question, I think something that I'm realizing is that a big piece of this work is really around learning how are they using location data, how are they weaponizing technology against us, understanding that, and then finding coalition to determine what action needs to be taken, and recognizing that, you know, those single location data does not just impact, you know, reproductive equity now is really focused on efforts to advance access to reproductive health care for everyone, free of political barriers, and expanding access to reproductive health care, advancing reproductive justice and equity, and maintaining access to abortion are central to our mission. But location shield data is not just an issue for abortion. There are migrants being attacked by this. There are queer people who are being attacked by this issue. And so it's an everyone problem. Mm-hmm. And I think that in finding coalition and using that as your path to determine action, it really gives you an opportunity to see directly kind of where these movements cross over, and allows you to engage in that cross-movement solidarity. And so I really believe that policy and community awareness are critical now, and getting those laws on the books at the state level is really critical, because we've seen now how our federal government will encroach and how they plan to weaponize our data against us. And I think that with having this policy in place at the state level, from the Dobbs decision, we saw that they effectively moved a lot of that decision-making power in terms of access to abortion to the hands of the state. And so a lot of this fight is going to be done at the state level, organizing your state legislatures to put into place protections to keep these companies accountable and to limit their ability to capitalize on the weaponization of your identity. And so I would say that those are kind of my big three things around, like, learning exactly what is going on, building coalitions to determine action that is informed by a variety of perspectives, and working towards policy solutions and community awareness to take steps to prevent that.
Thank you so much for that, Liv. And if there are any materials for us to get, just
I have
more about the policy,
lots of materials. Boy, do I have materials.
We would love to follow up on that. And I want to pass the mic to both Nicole and Afi to ask you about what is the role of doulas and birth workers monthly and RJF Futurisms, and what tools are we using now that we will be relevant in the futures.
I guess I'll go first. Well, I really see the role of doulas as a role that helps create some safety for clients and birthing people. And this might be like a little bit controversial, but safety is a subjective thing. Mm-hmm. And so, basically everything comes down to curiosity and being with the individual that's in front of you, which is something that they don't always get in healthcare because of the system not having time and space and energy for that. And so I really see my role as understanding the individual that is in front of me and what their definition of safety is. And that can be that someone's safety actually might be in being at the hospital with nurses and doctors, and then some people's definitions of safety and security might feel like they need to be at home in a place where they feel comfortable. So I think that I feel like my primary role is to understand the birthing people that I work with to try to find out what is safety for them and help create that. And yeah, and then, you know, I'm talking mostly about birth work in this moment, but really this extends into postpartum support as well and other kinds of support, where, you know, one of the tools that I think that I feel like I use now and I think really needs to be extended into the future is the tool of that person's community. So I come in and I'm a role and I know somebody for the period of time that I'm with them, but I don't know their history prior aside what they share with me, and I'm not going to be with them forever. So I really try to like activate the community that is around them so that they can have like a continuum of care that isn't just coming from me. And I think that that's like, I think everybody in this current political climate is starting to realize how important community is in this moment, and I really feel like that's something that we'll be needing in the future of birth work as well.
I love that. I want to piggyback on what you're saying about safety, and I think doulas really provide an opportunity for someone or a community to experience individualized care or care that is really intended for that community. Maybe going slightly off topic, but I'll do my best to bring it around. I'm thinking about the reason that is that because doulas are mostly unregulated. There's a lot of work happening now. I think maybe half of states are reimbursing for doula support and doula care, which is wonderful. However, I think the reason that we are effective is because we are beholden to the person in front of us who is not a system. And we attune to that person, and we, as you said, are sensitive to what they need. It's not our ego, and it's not our desire, it's what they are trying to achieve. So I think that's why doulas are really special and important and need to be protected. Which I think looks like not regulating us. So that was my piggyback comment. Okay, what is the role? Looking at my notes. I think mentorship is something that doesn't happen as much as it could. There is a big push now to educate doulas, which is wonderful, and there are lots and lots of doulas. But I'm thinking about this intergenerational piece. I'm thinking about this opportunity to model how midwives work, and you know, they have their trainees and they're with them, and oftentimes there's, you know, multiple generations. So I would love to see our role expand to have a bigger piece in terms of that mentorship, which I think also touches on your community piece. What else do I want to say? Looking towards alternative pathways. Because we're not regulated, I think that there is an opportunity to bring in all of these other tools, like the ones I mentioned in my introduction, plants and other alternative healing modalities. And the last thing I wanted to say, shape-shifting. I think that shape-shifting is something we really need to center in terms of what we can do, because it's one of those tools that requires us to be a little uncomfortable, and we all need more opportunities to be in our discomfort so that we can grow. But it looks like supporting someone who I may not birth that way, or I may not have chosen to have my abortion that way, or I may not have chosen to do my 7th repeat cesarean, or whatever it is that is not your personal alignment. It's how can I shapeshift to support the person in front of me so that they have their chance to be in their power. Because I think that's where we see these spiritual shifts. And we're talking about purpose. I think you mentioned purpose, Jallicia. These rites of passages are opportunities for us to come into our power and to align more deeply with our purpose. So I see, maybe I'm romanticizing our role a little bit, but I do think that personal growth, which then affects everyone that we come into contact with, that is an important piece to focus on.
We can keep that one down there, since we have a charged one. Thank you both so much. Passing the mic to Nashira. I have heard you assert that birth centers are our future. Yet here in Massachusetts, there have been several birth center closures in recent years, leaving just one birth center open in the state here in Northampton. What needs to happen in terms of policy, practice, and community psychology for the futures of reproductive justice to be accessible, to see accessible, sustainable community birth?
Thank you for that question. This work to open this person, but I think this work broadly has one foot in an old paradigm and one foot in a new, and there's nothing new under the sun, so an ancestral paradigm. And so we are trying to figure out how to open a birth center that is licensed by the state, regulated, in contract with insurance providers, zoned, while also reaching back and looking forward to be in deep liberatory practice and space. And I was thinking in preparation for this question about something that Dr. Rupa Myra said. She said institutions need to compost themselves to make room for reimagining. Institutions need to compost themselves to make room for reimagining. She goes on to say, I don't hold any belief that institutions that were framed under white dominance and oppression can be tweaked to become vessels of equity. And so I'm really appreciating coming after the two of you, where even specifically naming that doulas as unregulated gives you license, or the absence of license, to be in a liberatory relationship with your clients and with your community. And so, I think that the moment that we're in, or at least how I arrived to the work, is this need to straddle, right? To as we are reintroducing midwifery to the community, midwifery's always been here, right? We can talk about how it got racially redlined and decolonized and became very white. That we are reintroducing midwifery to the community, and then as such, and we are doing so in a time of a crisis of maternal health that bears down inequitably in communities of color. And so I want to share a little bit of what I hear and how we are working to be in the both and, to be in a liberatory practice space while also, we need to be licensed by the state and covered by insurance. But I want to say I got kind of I don't know if it was an assignment. I got a push from a really dope midwife in my world, in my ecosystem. And I was saying, these things that I just said, well, we have to be licensed by the state. And they were like, I mean, do you? Right? Period. And it stretched me to go I can imagine a time in the future where there are different conversations and where there are birth centers, again, back in the home of the midwife. And we have addressed the tension between the current systems that we exist in and how we experience and manifest liberatory practice in healthcare specifically. And that is not my work right now, right? So I'm trying to figure out how to reintegrate midwifery in Boston, an incredibly healthcare dominated, metropolis, where because we have so many hospitals and 20-something community health centers, there's often the question well, why do we need a birth center, right? We have robust healthcare infrastructure here. So I just want to share some of what I've heard. And I'm going to try to anchor myself to share it with love and humility, because sometimes it comes up for me as a lot of frustration from what I'm hearing back from community, but also some shame and embarrassment in maybe my leadership and what have I not been able to do in the last 10 years to get people, okay, thank you, Mom Belly, not my leadership, but what have I not been able to do in the last decade, and what am I up against, right? Maybe bigger, what are we up against? So here's a couple of things that I've heard. Boston, Roxbury in particular, which is the heart of Boston, the heart of Black Boston, doesn't need a birth center because we have Boston Medical Center and a trauma unit right down the street. This birth center is not for us. Birth centers cost $1,500 a night, and that is not a model that is going to work for people here in Roxbury. Midwifery is for crunchy white women. That's not for us. And this one. If we are more likely to die in childbirth, why would you take us outside of the hospital?
That's where you go.
Right.
That's where you get it back.
Right. And how do we hold that fear and trauma, right? And receive and know also that in some ways that is being said because the headlines for the last many years have actually said there is a Black maternal health crisis. Right? I often say there is a crisis of maternal health that bears down inequitably on Black folks, but it ain't working well for white women either. Let's be very clear about the data of outcomes for white cis women earning 6 figures in this country compared to other economically advantaged countries. And so I hear that pushback and I feel a whole bunch of things, frustration, I feel sad. And it roots my work in then saying, so how do we meet folks where they're at? How do we talk about what it is that we're reintroducing? How do we invite folks to remember that your mom was caught by a midwife, that your grandma was the midwife, right? That there was a time not too long ago that midwives caught all the babies, that Black midwives caught all the babies, that the hospital is the site of a lot of trauma and loss. And also, there is a consequence to say that while the majority of folks will still continue to birth in the hospital, even if we, open this birth center, we will do, 2% of the market share for Suffolk County, right? So there is also a tension in saying, well, the hospital is the site of loss and trauma and death. Oh, but we can't actually take you because we only take 200 people a year. So, right? So there is like all of this kind of complexity. So, I'm getting off topic. I think I just wanted to circle back to then, in the context of yes, we need to be in contract with insurance companies. We need to be licensed by the state. We need to be zoned by the city of Boston. And folks have followed us in the last week. The zoning board voted to deny our variance, so that now I'm the proud owner of a $2.5 million property in Roxbury that I can't build a birth center on. Because of a lot of things, and because some folks effectively pushed back and said we don't want that commercial use in our community, that the birth center should go down and be in a commercial district in a storefront. And I'm pushing back again in the system saying, I understand that the zoning needs to be commercial, and also the use really should be in a residential setting. It should really be in a home-like setting, and not down in a storefront between the T-Mobile and the hair shop. Full stop. But nonetheless, the zoning board voted us down, and so now we're in another fight again in this system that was not designed to advance equity, to figure out how to open this birth center in Boston. But I want to offer an example of where I think our liberatory practice feels very rich and very promising. Neighborhood Birth Center bought that property for $2.5 million in partnership with other base building social justice movement organizations. We pulled our resources together to do what no one of our organizations could do alone. I didn't have the resource to buy that or to build new construction and develop a $6 million building. We pulled our resources together, made the purchase, then we pulled our human resources together and our ecosystem, and we raised the balance of nearly $11 million in the last 2 years to build the birth center, and we're calling it more broadly the Community Movement Commons, which is a first floor birth center, second floor office space, community gathering space, ceremony space, yoga, space for youth who are doing prison abolition work, space for healers to organize and to do their work. And in doing so, we also have, so what I've learned in the last couple of years in being in this partnership is about solidarity economy, right? Beloved economy, how we pool resources, how even though the birth center, you know, I said to the friends who we were buying the project with, I was like, y'all really want to partner with me? I'm gonna come with no money and these wicked regulations. So we're gonna look at property together, but I'm gonna be like, well, that one doesn't work for me because I need an ambulance access, and that one doesn't work for me because it's near the not near the hospital, and right. And they were like, yes, we want to partner with you and we want to do this together. It meant that even though the birth center has the largest square footage in the property together, that we have not had to raise proportionally the largest amount of resource, right? That other organizations are bringing to bear what they have so that collectively we can do this. And so the practice of solidarity economy, of really being in a beloved economy, and the other thing I want to say is just also a practice of governing collective, like shared governance, right? So we have together created and again, 1 foot in the nonprofit industrial complex because we need to raise the funds. So we created a nonprofit, single member LLC, complex legal structure. And we've created a board where we are practicing co-governance, where we have created seats on the board for community members from Roxbury to be part of the decision-making body for this property. And together how we make decisions, how we move in consensus, how we are actually you know, our meetings are like, you know, between 4 and 8 hours long, and we break bread, and we actually, we're like, if we don't have the space yet, so we're either on Zoom or in my living room, but we are practicing the way we want to be together when we are in that beautiful sunlit room where the yoga mats are out, right? And so part of that is if we want that in the future, how are we practicing that in the ways that we are together right now? How we show up on Zoom, how we cook for each other, how we, our early practice was that we had a plant that we each took care of, and between each meeting, then we would bring it back to the meeting, and the next person would take the plant. And it was a practice of stewarding a resource together, and sharing it and building trust that we were each gonna hold the plant and hold the project and hold the $11 million with care and love and in deep solidarity. So I'll stop there, and other things that I forgot to say will come back to me.